Welcome to our Rhode Island Masterclass. Today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know to apply for an adult use cannabis retailer license in Rhode Island. Let's get started. Get to know CannDelta. We are a team of business strategists, regulatory experts, and marketing specialists. We are very trained in the consulting space for cannabis specifically. We've helped a number of folks across the country, and we're very excited to talk about what Rhode Island has to offer. We are also joined by our special guest, Leslie Parker from APS. Leslie, you have the floor.
Great. Thanks, Lucas. My name is Leslie Parker. I'm a litigation and regulatory attorney at Adler, Pollock and Sheehan in Providence. I'm also the co-chair of our cannabis group, where I focus on the regulatory and licensing side. I deal a lot with compliance, applications, litigation matters, and dealing with regulators. So I'm happy to be here.
Leslie, we're very happy to have you here. You're our boots on the ground in Rhode Island, and we really appreciate you sharing a few moments with us to provide us with your expertise and hopefully a little bit of free legal advice. Fingers crossed.
I can't be giving legal advice out, but I can be sharing my expertise.
Awesome. So even though Leslie Parker is a lawyer, she's not quite your lawyer unless you've actually retained her. And if you have information about, retaining Leslie, I'm sure she would love to share her contact information at the end of the webinar. I'm your host. I'm Dr. Lucas McCann. I'm the co-founder and CSO at CannDelta, where I oversee all of the scientific and startup business strategies for all the projects happening within our firm. I co-founded this in 2018. We've helped launch actually closer to 400 businesses now across the U.S. and in international markets, including working with a lot of compacts, tribes, indigenous, and First Nations communities, as well as setting up regulatory regimes for governments, for federal governments as well. My background's in medicinal organic chemistry, and I've got a great wealth of expertise in the cannabis space as it pertains to product commercialization, production, testing, licensing, and operations across all aspects of the industry. We have an office in New York, but we work across the country and internationally. You can visit us. We're at 99 Hudson Street in Manhattan at the corner of Franklin and Hudson. And over the 8 years that we've been in business, we've helped launch over 400 cannabis businesses successfully internationally. And we specialize in helping launch small businesses into industry-leading facilities all the way up into publicly traded entities. We've been featured in Forbes, High Times, MJ Biz, and many other publications. Our clients span the verticals from production, cultivators, manufacturing, testing labs to retail dispensary operators. We've effectively helped consult with operators through all the verticals, including vertically integrated entities. If you are looking for some free resources to help get you started, we have our free ebook. It's a Rhode Island application guide, which provides a step-by-step detailed license application guide that's available on our website for download now. But let's jump in. So our goal for today is to help you to apply for a Rhode Island cannabis license and launch a compliant and profitable dispensary as quickly as possible. Now, cannabis can be a very tricky industry to enter into. One, it's new for many, and for the regulators, it is also new. Having said that, it is also very heavily regulated, even higher than sometimes alcohol or tobacco. We find cannabis to be top shelf in terms of the requirements that you need to comply by under the Act and the corresponding regulations. So let's talk a little bit about the history. Leslie.
All right. So how we got here, Rhode Island has a long history in terms of cannabis and cannabis regulation. In 2006, the first legislation was enacted in Rhode Island, and that's the Edward O. Hawkins and Thomas C. Slater Medical Marijuana Act. That allows for that allowed for patients to grow and buy cannabis. And then in 2009, Rhode Island introduced compassion centers, and that allowed 3 compassion centers to come online for medical cannabis. And then in 2019, the number of compassion centers expanded from 3 to 9. Now, not all of those got off the ground right away. So right now there are 7 currently online. And then in 2022, the Rhode Island Cannabis Act legalized adult use cannabis. So that created the Cannabis Control Commission. the regulatory body used to be housed in Rhode Island's Department of Business Regulation. It moved everything to the CCC. There are three commissioners, and their administrative arm is called the Cannabis Office. That transition took some time, right? You have to get the commissioners appointed, you've got to get the staff, you have to write new regulations and figure out the lottery process. So now, 3 years later, here we are. They're getting ready for these applications to be submitted. So it took some time. And now the first round of applications for retail licenses are opening. There are 24 total across 6 regions. And Lucas, I know you're going to talk about that, so I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you. Oops. All right. So in terms of the activities that are actually permissible under an adult use retail dispensary license, these are somewhat limited. So it is segmented in that you're not participating on the production side of the industry. So you are buying your product that are produced in state. Everything that's going to be sold, produced, and consumed through the legal market is going to happen in Rhode Island. So really, it's great because it's helping to boost the economy, to drive local business, to increase money that's coming into potentially infrastructure investment through taxation, and also creating jobs. So it's a really great opportunity for Rhode Islanders to come in and participate in this new burgeoning market, which we're really excited about. Plus, there is a social equity program that also offers an edge for folks who took advantage of this application process earlier this summer to be able to apply for those special licenses that are designated for that category. Now, if you have a retailer license in Rhode Island, you are allowed to buy from licensed cultivators or manufacturers and sell those products in your store, which are finished, final, tested packages of cannabis products. You are not allowed to grow or to participate in any tier of production under this license. And you need a location. So that location must comply with certain zoning, physical security, and compliance regulations. No vertical integration is allowed for license holders who own interest in a retailer license that has a retailer license assigned to it. So no vertical integration or multiple license types are allowed in this particular market. So one license allows you to have one store, one license, one store. And when we're talking about licenses, we're talking about the physical location that has been licensed. So licenses cannot easily necessarily be transferable. There's potentially a transfer process, but once a store is licensed, that doesn't necessarily give an operator permission to open up several other stores without explicit permission from the commission. So who is this opportunity ideal for? Well, Rhode Islanders who are looking to, one, who might already own an existing business, it would be ideal for them because you do need to have property, either a lease or a deed, and LOIs will not be accepted as part of the application, or a lease or a deed that is in the name of the operator who is going to be applying for the license. So having a retail space that meets zoning requirements would be very ideal. Access to some startup capital, because it can be a somewhat capital intensive process to start up the business and to meet the physical security requirements under the regulations. Or if you are an investor who's willing to work with other operators, that could be a great opportunity for you to participate in this market. Now, it's important to know that you need to have the property already secured and enough capital to pay for the $7,500 application fee, and when your license is awarded, the licensing fee, unless you're a social equity, which grants you 1 year of grace on both those fees, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, Leslie had mentioned that there are 24 total licenses available. This application portal has been open since September 12th of 2025. Interestingly enough, a lot of the social equity verification applicants still haven't or are just starting to receive their social equity verification now. But 6 of those licenses are going to be reserved for social equity applicants. 6 are going to be reserved for worker cooperatives. That is where we have worker-owned businesses applying. And 12 will be for the other applicants who fall into a more general category, perhaps single entity LLCs that don't necessarily apply for social equity or who miss the social equity application window. Now, in terms of zoning and license distribution, we have 6 geographical zones across Rhode Island. So licenses will be distributed amongst those 6 regions. There'll be 4 retail licenses per zone, allowing for 24 total. In terms of the zoning requirements, you must meet local zoning approvals, and that can include setback distances from schools and other sensitive buildings. So for example, zones 1 through 6, we've got them listed here. Again, you can apply for an application in each one of these zones, but you cannot hold an interest in an entity that holds 2 licenses in one particular zone. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add to that, Leslie.
No, I think that's right. And I'll address, there were some updates on the zoning requirements that the CCC recently gave in terms of timing. So we can talk about that too coming up.
So step 1 is to complete all of the AURP forms, secure a compliant location or provide proof of a secured location, and obtain local authorization. So what does it take to qualify for a retail license?
So let's talk in generalities first. First, you need, and I'm going to focus on a business entity, but you need to be a Rhode Island business entity. So you need to be registered with the Secretary of State in Rhode Island and be domesticated here. Your principal place of business needs to be in Rhode Island, and you can be really any corporate form that you'd like, corporation, LLC, LLP, or the like. And we'll talk in more detail about that shortly. A big item that folks need to pay attention to is at least 51% of the equity in the business needs to be owned by a Rhode Island resident. And interestingly, that also goes to control. So it can't just be that you hold 51% of the equity, but don't control it. The control and the equity needs to be held by a Rhode Island resident. And the CCC has said that they are looking to your residency at the time of the filing of the application. And then we'll talk more about background checks and disqualifying convictions, but that's something to be aware of as well. And finally, again, we'll talk more about zoning, like we just discussed. In terms of ownership and background checks, more specifically, first, on the application, you're going to need to disclose all parties of interest. And so that's kind of my own term of art, but it has a really broad definition. It can be any owner, direct or in to go up the chain as far as possible until you get to a physical person for each entity. Officers, managers, directors, anyone with operational control, investors, or if you call your investor something different, that person, anyone with a financial interest, anyone giving a loan, whether it's a loan or if it's a loan of equipment, anything like that. And then any management agreements. You also have to disclose anyone with a contingent agreement. So, if you get the license, then you will have a membership interest or something like that. They need to be disclosed as well. And then at the initial application period, you need to certify regarding disqualifying convictions. Once the lottery takes place, then there will be the background check. But in terms of a disqualifying conviction, a cannabis possession conviction does not automatically disqualify you. So it must be substantially related to the occupation at issue here or distribution to a minor in order to disqualify you. And there are multiple steps then that the CCC would go through if they believe it's a disqualifying conviction, so that it doesn't automatically knock you out. There's a administrative process to go through. And then finally, there's a related party ownership cap. And so while you can have an ownership interest in more than one CCC licensed entity, for example, a cultivator and one of the applicants, you cannot own more than 10% in two entities. So if you currently have a cultivation operation, you cannot own the majority stake in that as well as a majority stake in an applicant. And so that's just important to keep in mind. But you can own up to 10%, which is helpful. And now from the business side, generally what you'll do is you'll register with the Rhode Island Secretary of State, and you'll register generally as an LLC, a corporation, a partnership. And this is where it's important to talk with your attorney and your CPA about your specific facts and structure. And you also want to talk about your tax status. Will you be taxed as a C Corp versus an S Corp? And you'll hear a lot about cannabis entities going the C Corp route. But again, you should talk with your own CPA and your own attorney about that. And then in terms of banking relationships, you should get out in front of that and make sure you have a compliant banking relationship. Oftentimes, you can speak with other folks in Rhode Island who are in the industry who can recommend bankers that they work with. And then you'll need corporate documents. So let's say you're an LLC, you're going to need your operating agreement and your registration with the Secretary of State. And those will need to be provided with your application. So you need to get on those as soon as possible. In addition, you'll also have to provide any contracts. So if you have any lenders, management agreements, or the like, you'll need those for your application. And finally, when you register with the Secretary of State, make sure you're thinking about a trade name or a doing business as name, because you'll want to include that when you register as well. Right. And now the application itself. So once you've gone through all of that and you've formed your LLC, you know who your key people are, then it's time to fill out your application. You've got the general application form. You need pretty extensive ownership disclosures. So you're going to need your investors' social security numbers, date of birth, and the like. And so you'll have to work with them on that. And then in terms of the criminal background check, you'll need to attest regarding any disqualifying information. You'll need to have an operations manual ready to go, your business plan, and your business plan needs to include a source of funds. And the source of funds needs to show that you have enough to pay the license fee if you're selected, as well as that build out period, so that you can get to opening. And that's really what the CCC wants to know. You'll need your security and safety plan, proof of zoning. You'll need a certificate of good standing from the Rhode Island Secretary of State, as well as a tax compliance attestation that you're in good standing. You'll have to disclose any other licenses you hold in state or out of state. And then you'll have to provide those business and government docs that we just discussed a minute ago. And finally, you'll pay that application fee. So that's $7,500, as Lucas mentioned, unless you're a social equity applicant. All right, and zoning, which I alluded to earlier. You'll need to provide local zoning compliance with your application. And as you know, zoning compliance can be a time-consuming process. So the CCC just updated the process to show zoning compliance. And what they've said is applicants will have 60 days from January 1st to demonstrate final zoning approval. So that gives folks a little bit of wiggle room there if you're working on getting your special use permit. But in my experience, getting a special use permit takes much longer than 60 days. So it depends on the town you're in, but that's something that really you need to get started on right away. And So you need to be located in a zone that either allows for retail cannabis location by right, or you need to have a special use permit. And you're going to need to have a zoning certificate that says either it's by right or you need the permit. And if you need the permit within those 60 days, you need to provide it. Right, Lucas.
There we go. Unmuted myself. Awesome. So I think that was a pretty extensive conversation on what that looks like for getting your business documents and special use permit in order. In terms of the proximity restrictions, a cannabis business or a cannabis dispensary may not be located within 500 feet of an existing uh, public or private school, which is effectively K to 12. So local authority can be required. Cities may set reasonable rules for hours, parking, signage, and security, as long as that those are consistent with state law. They're not permitted to make this too onerous or too difficult to be able to comply with. And retail licenses require municipal confirmation of zoning and ordinance compliance. Now, step two includes submitting your application online. So a few things. There's an application portal provided by the CCC that allows for you to set up a username and password, and all of these documents, again, will be submitted electronically to the state. The CCC then reviews and conducts a lottery if required. So if the number of applicants is less than the total number of retail stores applications that are available or equal to, they may not proceed with the lottery. However, it's more likely that they'll have more applications submitted than for the total number of eligible stores, and we'll have to proceed with the lottery procedure. So the applications are reviewed before the lottery to ensure they meet all state and local requirements. The lottery is held only when more qualified applications are submitted than available licenses in a zone. So for eligibility, we need the entity to be in good standing. The owners have to be adults, 21 years of age or older, with a clean record, barring some cannabis convictions, which we can talk about down the road, and they've got to be tax compliant. So they're looking for folks who have made good on paying their taxes. And let's keep in mind what a big driving proponent for legalization is. It's to drive money into infrastructure and to collect taxes, both at the state and local level. For location, we need proof of site control and zoning compliance and plans. Several plans are required as part of your application, including business, physical security, and operations that go into your application. Further to that, because these plans are being submitted in advance of you actually building out your store, we want to make sure that one, that everything in there is going to be feasible, but that it's also compliant. So we want to make sure that we're hitting a level of compliance without going too overboard on what we're committing to in an application. There is a lot of financial information that goes for the applicant and anyone who holds a financial interest, and the application fee, of course, with proof of funding being verified. And then compliance, once the CCC has verified that the application meets compliance that application then gets put into the pool, the lottery will be held. And I've been reading some information recently through articles stating that in terms of when that lottery will actually occur, that timeline could potentially be shifted. Once that lottery is conducted and your application has been drawn and you are awarded a preliminary or conditional license, the process of building out the store then proceeds. So from licensing, where we prepare all the plans and submit the application, to the license being awarded, initiates then sort of the build out process where we look to design, construct, and help to bring the location into compliance with the law and the regulations. So throughout this period, we'll be helping to manage vendors, materials, and security designs to show that you've met the compliance under the regulations. And then towards the end of this timeline, we would look to more aggressively set up the operational infrastructure required to operate the store, which can include staffing, implementing your standard operating procedures. And ones of interest typically that the CCC will have a strong interest in is on track and trace procedures, accepting inventory, and conducting recalls, as well as quarantining any products that might have been recalled throughout the process. So just some free advice there that that's a very important area to be looking into to demonstrate compliance with the CCC. And then, of course, we want to ensure compliant and scalable operations when setting up that business. So step 4, looking at what the build out actually can contain. Visual surveillance is going to be a key requirement around retail store perimeters, including the exterior, allowing for adequate cameras that provide sufficient coverage in both day and low light or nighttime conditions. We need to have secure locking mechanisms in all the entry points, as well as having those entry points under visual surveillance. And we typically like to have some kind of access control to restricted areas. On the doors, we're typically looking for commercial grade doors with commercial grade locks and some kind of intrusion detection system around the perimeter of the building. And there needs to be some kind of minimum number of employees available at all times, right? So we can't have the store unsupervised during operating hours unless the store has been temporarily closed. In terms of lighting, it's very important to have sufficient exterior lighting as part of your security, as well as adequate lighting in the interior. This helps to maintain a strong sense of security and situational awareness around your building. So sufficient brightness to support surveillance cameras or cameras that can also flip into low light or no light mode is very important. And then in terms of product display and storage, the retail area must be designated for customer access. So we need a store that allows, again, for easy customer access. Samples to be displayed in jars, but not for sale, which must be tethered to a display case, can be allowed. We call these sensory jars, which allow to enhance customer experience by demonstrating some of the products that are available for sale. And all other cannabis products typically need to be locked away in locked drawers or in a secured storage area, usually located at the back of the store. Just highlighting some of the stores that we've worked with in the past. This particular one was a licensed CBD retail store that looked to convert its operations to a cannabis retail dispensary for adult use. Now, there's a lot of important features here that we'd like to point out. We had visual surveillance already located around this particular store that we worked with. However, many of the cameras were part of a legacy system, and some of the cameras were Wi-Fi enabled cameras that you would buy either through Costco membership or with Amazon. Now, some of these cameras, although very convenient and easy to install, don't necessarily comply with the resolution requirements that are set out in the regulations, nor can they provide adequate storage and retention that the CCC is looking for. So ensuring that your cameras have a level of certification, minimum level of certification, and that you've got the proper retention is going to be imperative. Second, in terms of the display of cannabis products, we want to make sure that we're not showing cannabis products that can be easily visible from outside of the store. So limiting sight lines by organizing your cabinets and display cases in a particular way can help to minimize this. In terms of people and product flow, we have here a very standard retail dispensary floor plan that we've used in countless operations, where if we look at Project Right, we see an entry there that allows for some kind of visible screen where we can have ID verification at the beginning of the store before patrons enter. Then they enter into the large open space, which is our retail space, which is open to the public once age has been verified. And as well as to staff, followed by the point of sale counter located mid-project. Behind that, we see a wall, and behind that wall, a box, which is the location of our secured storage. This kind of layout helps to optimize retail flow by minimizing the amount of steps that folks typically need to take, especially if we implement something like a pass-through between the secured storage, which again is employee and employees only, and the customer sales floor, which again is on Project Right. Towards the back of the store, we'd have again in our employee-only area, restrooms, manager office, maybe a boardroom in there, and a space for employees to hang their coat and leave personal items. evaluating the physical security components of a store, we want to make sure that we're highlighting some very important features. And that includes, for instance, the store perimeter. So store perimeters need to be unique. It should have its own entrance and should not be accessible by entering through another business. Um, in terms of best practices, we typically like to have two sets of cameras on the outside to minimize any kind of blind spots where there could be entry points. Here on the left side of the project, we have the main entry point, which is located in the parking lot. On the right side, it is an area in which is typically reserved for deliveries and employee access. Having two sets of cameras at either points allow for an uninterrupted image. Even if one of the cameras goes down, we have a nice layer of redundancy built into the security plan to ensure uninterrupted awareness of anything happening around that entrance and around the parking lot. When putting together a security plan, we like to highlight the use case of many of the different areas, as well as areas and age-gated areas would be. Typically, before the age gate, we'd have that red customer area just prior to the verification step, followed by age gated, and then behind the point of sale and behind the door that leads, we would define that as a staff only area, meaning that customers wouldn't have free access into those spaces. Also, storage, our employee areas, and our manager office, as well as any of the security and located in that yellow area. When also looking at alarm partitions, particularly if there's going to be minimal staff present, it is a huge advantage to have some of these areas on separate alarm partitions. Now, what that means is that if the secured storage, for instance, is empty and there are no staff members there, that we can keep that particular area locked and alarmed at all times. Now, if someone were to gain forced entry into that space without badging the proper credentials, or there was maybe an attack through a ceiling or an adjacent neighboring wall, that because that area is separately go off hours and people were inside, if that storeroom was empty and alarmed. Highlighting here with these red circles are some different kinds of visual surveillance that we might implement in a retail dispensary. Behind the point of sale, we've got a dome camera facing towards the cash register, which keeps eyes on the cash drawers, as well as the might be approaching the point of sale. This particular camera works really well when used in combination with other cameras, as there's typically a blind spot directly below this particular camera. Towards the left at the top of the screen, we have a fisheye camera, which works excellently when positioned on a pendant style, typically towards the middle of the store, because it does an excellent job at giving an uninterrupted 360-degree view of any activity around the store, regardless of the setup of maybe encumbering display cases or shelving, which can sometimes block the view that we might have perhaps slightly inhibited by the dome camera located behind the gentleman at the point of sale. When implementing display cases, we like to feature some of the products in these cases. This is an example of one that had been adapted from pawn shops or jewelry stores, which has a robust anti-shatter tempered glass layer with a sliding drawer that pulls out and locking shelving underneath, which provides an excellent way to securely store cannabis products on the sales floor. Example of a manager's office to drilling a safe drop located just on the right, lower right there under the word office, and a visual surveillance screen so that if managers are working in the back, they can keep eyes on any activity happening in and around the store, including any entry points, exits for customers, as well as the number of staff working and customers on the sales floor. And then quickly on the kinds of doors that we see, there are a number of ways to meet the regulations. Each one sort of has its own advantages and disadvantages. For this particular door schedule, we're looking at a commercial grade door with a simple barrel lock using a key control system, which again has a physical key that is required by the key holder to open up, positioned in such a way to minimize attacks. We have the hinges on the safe side of the door and a door contact position there to only alarm in the event that that door is forced when the alarm is active. Now, this is a very low-cost way of implementing intrusion detection and access control. However, it doesn't say much about unauthorized access or help to prevent unauthorized access if we're using a key control system. Anyone with a key or anyone who can force that door while that alarm is down won't necessarily trigger an alarm. Versus once we implement something like a dual factor card reader with an electric strike plate. Now, this minimizes the use of keys. You can still use keys. However, with the implementation of electric strike and a card reader, now you can provide access cards to employees. There's a higher cost of implementation, but now even when if that card reader doesn't receive an authorized swipe, combined with an authorized PIN, that again was where the two-factor comes from, and that door becomes forced, even if the alarm is not necessarily activated within the store, it recognizes that as a forced door and sounds an alarm. A little bit higher cost to implement, but it also creates an excellent record of access and egress through all the areas of your retail store. And then combining that with a video doorbell, again, at an entry point for maybe entrance into a storage room or where you might be receiving product on an exterior door there, can provide heightened layers of awareness for any activity around the space. Something to consider, we'd usually make recommendations that you would have in FBI evidence rooms for the construction of our secured storage areas. We can sort of bring that down slightly, but there are some best practices that we typically like to recommend. That can include duress alarms if there's an emergency, a panic button, shelving, and again, visual surveillance throughout these areas, as well as work tables. Things to consider are having walls that are typically reinforced with some material. This can include 9/16 plywood underneath a layer of drywall, or reinforced metal mesh walls that can become effectively impenetrable in a short amount of time with simple hand tools. Use of commercial grade doors is imperative, and looking at access to the ceiling, as we've seen many dispensaries become subjects to theft and robbery when would-be robbers try to access the secure room from the top of the store through the ceiling by simply cutting a hole. So being aware of what's around you, what's above you, is going to be very important for ensuring complete control of what's happening in your secure storage area. And again, implementing cameras, infrared motion detectors, and keypads and alarms can generally help to ensure that if you would experience a theft event or a robbery event, that is detected as soon as possible. And then, of course, you're only as compliant as your least compliant SOPs around the store can ensure proper operations, particularly during key events that might be fringe, such as how to conduct a recall or even reporting adverse events. So having a robust set of standard operating procedures can be an important part of training your staff, as well as preparing for what to do in the event that certain, let's say, uncommon events happen. Also describes simple day-to-day events such as the opening, closing, counting of cash for a particular store. And not to say that you necessarily need to memorize all the information in an SOP when you're training staff or working in a cannabis retail dispensary, but having very much a helpful tool when working in a store. Here's an example of a pass-through that we've seen in many stores, which allows for no sight lines and the distribution of cannabis products. Each one of these cubby holes represents a point of sale. Would work in the back with access to a visual monitor, watching all the cameras in the store, and pick orders as they're getting transacted through the point of sale systems in the front of the store. In terms of the build-out costs, I think it's important to be aware that higher-end retail can be somewhere between $90 to $290 per square foot for a cannabis retail dispensary, depending on what you're starting with. We've seen a lot of conversions from T-Mobile cell phone stores to CBD stores to vape shops. But when looking to convert restaurants, we're definitely going to be on the higher end of that. And considerations can include elements like drywall, painting, electrical, HVAC, flooring. So premium flooring options can go anywhere from $10 to $30 per square foot. Lighting, $5 to $20 per square foot. Fixtures such as custom cabinetry, shelves, and countertops, anywhere from $10 to $40 per square foot. And then security can range upwards of $15 per square foot. And then also signage and branding. It can be very difficult sometimes to just open up your doors and going fishing for clients. So we want to make sure that we put up some signage to create awareness of the brand and of the entity and what you're selling. That can go anywhere from $5 to $15 per square foot. So typically a minimum budget of about six figures at $125,000 is what we typically would see most operators come into the space with before committing down the pathway. So important to, one, be prepared for some of this, and this can be even before we've considered an inventory purchase. And then finally, begin operating. So once your license is approved and you complete all the final state and local inspections, you've activated your seed to sale tracking system, which will be done through Metric in Rhode Island. You ensure your staff are trained. That training has been documented, and the Cannabis Control gives you the Cannabis Control Commission gives you final authorization. You can officially open your doors and begin sales. So again, just to highlight on the fees, the application fee of $7,500. Once your application is selected, you'll have a $30,000 licensing fee. Both of those, again, are waived if you're a social equity applicant, and also be prepared for that six-figure build out. All right, so after you click submit, Leslie, what do you need to know?
I'm muted. So going back to what happens when you click submit on that application, there's a 90-day review period that starts. And during that review period, there's still the 60 days to provide zoning compliance. And also the CCC has said they're going to work with municipalities to confirm whether you have that zoning approval in those 90 days. And then the plan is in May of 2026, the CCC will conduct this random hybrid selection process, also known as a lottery. But they've been very clear that might get pushed. So stay tuned. Hopefully this happens in May, but there's a chance that you're looking at it in the future at some date. And I think I should mention that really depends on volume, right? On how many applications they get, and whether they're able to do this when they plan. Okay. So operating within the rules, you need to maintain compliance with the regulations. That's obvious, but it's important that you understand what's in the regulations. And a lot of what Lucas just talked about with the build out is in there. But also post build out, you need to understand what your obligations are. And one of the best things you can do is stay up to date with the CCC and the cannabis office. They'll issue bulletins, guidelines, watch their meetings. They're online. So you understand what's going on. And the cannabis office, a lot of the folks who work there have been doing this for a long time. So they want to help you comply and they want to be in touch with you. So maintain a relationship with them. You will have annual inspections. You'll have an inspection before you open, and then you'll have annual inspections. And you can also be subject to random inspections. Get to know the inspectors. They can give you feedback too on, you might be compliant. They might also know some extra things you can do to ensure, best practices. Additionally, if you have changes, really any change, like ownership and management changes are the most important, but any kind of change you want to make that was not in your application, you should operate under the assumption that you need to give 60 days notice to the CCC and they need to approve that. So if there's a funding change, you have a new investor, you need to immediately let them know, file the required paperwork and get approval. You cannot be making any changes without their approval. And then just good business practice, make sure you have all your insurance and you maintain it regularly. You're working with a broker and you're doing all your tax filings, you're filing your annual report with the Secretary of State and the like. And in terms of getting up to speed, following up on Lucas's comments about the build out, once you receive the provisional license, everyone but social equity applicants has 6 months, or excuse me, 9 months to satisfy the requirements to open, the CCC requirements. If you're a social equity applicant, you have 12 months to do that. And then once you get your license in hand, you have 3 months to open, to actually start selling. And the social equity applicants have 6 months. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of hitting the ground running with the build out, and making sure you're complying with the rules from day one. And then in terms of complying with the rules, one of the big parts of that is going to be seed to sale tracking and inventory tracking. So the CCC requires the use of Metric. That's a seed to sale tracking system. And if you get the license, you'll get set up on that and you'll go through trainings and understand how to do that. You should also make sure you're keeping logs. About the employee access records are going to be important. And the CCC will want to see those. In the cannabis office, when they come out and they do inspections or they'll request documents, they'll want to see that as well. And they do look at Metric and make sure that, everything looks kosher and good. And so again, just making sure that you're following the guidance and you're using best practices is important on seed to sale.
That's great advice, Leslie. I think one of the important things about Metric is that one, it's required to be compliant, but it is there to prevent a couple of important things from happening in the industry, mostly to protect it. That can include limiting any possibility for inversion or diversion to or from the illicit market. So for those that aren't aware, Metric is a seed to sale tracking system or a track and trace program, which cultivators and folks on the production side will use, that follows plants all the way to lots or batches, all the way to final finished packaged or cannabis products, the end there. And why that's important is that if for some reason a batch or a lot is found to have non-compliant labels, all the way down to some kind of testing issues, that the state has a way to monitor that those lots have been properly recalled, that is put into quarantine at a retail store when a recall has been conducted, either voluntary or state mandated, and that those products are returned to the manufacturer or cultivator for quarantine and eventual destruction. So again, a big highlight as to why it's important, especially from the production side, for compliance and having a keen eye on things like correct labeling and adherence to testing standards, is because recalls can be very expensive. They can be hugely inconvenient for the retailer and can hurt reputations for the brands. So some common compliance challenges that we've seen a number of our clients experience can include oversight. So having a very regulated industry means that you're not just subject to a ton of scrutiny at the beginning of this process, but you will continue to be subject to CCC audits, inspections, sometimes even tied to a condition of renewal of your license, and a set of regulations that will continue to evolve. Now, typically, we don't see regulations become more difficult or stringent to adhere to as an industry is born, but they can be. And in most cases, it's typically a relaxation of some things, but as an operator, it's very, very important to understand where the line of compliance lays, because as an operator, the more time we spend being worried about compliance, the less time we can be worried about profitability and actually making money. So that balance is delicate and very, very important to ensure that we're walking that well. And we can do that by adherence to the rules, by understanding sort of where that line is. Very important on the security side, when we talked about implementing something like a card reader, can eliminate the need for maybe paper access for, let's say, a secure storage room, which is required in some cultivation facilities. For instance, every time an employee accesses a secure storage room, they may need to log that record. But using something like a card reader does that automatically for you. So obviously an increased cost to implement those systems. And with that increased cost comes increased convenience also. Something you got to balance out when you're looking at your budget. Following SOPs, training your employees on SOPs, and ensuring that if some of these adverse events happen with consumers, or there's a robbery or a theft, that we're following the proper procedure and complying with the regulations and the laws, and ensuring that we're doing everything by the book is very important. So having a set of SOPs, having your employees trained on those, documenting that training, and ensuring that you review and update those as the industry progresses is super important. And again, as we talked about implementing seed to sale, this is not a debatable matter. This is something you must implement before you can operate and open up your doors. All right, very quickly on marketing. So marketing is something that really helps to drive business, but it's extremely scrutinized and regulated. So you have to be very careful, not just from the state level of compliance, but also with your online presence with companies like Google. So what's allowed? Websites, videos, and social media. Typically, if we're having a website, we need something that's age gated that clearly displays the operator's license number towards the bottom. That's really important. Perhaps some form of print being distributed where that audience is 21 years of age or older. But things that might not be allowed, that are certainly not allowed, include having cannabis products or signage or advertisements that include of a medical effect or curative effects for that particular product. So even providing anecdotal evidence is against the laws and the regulations. So you need to be very, very careful about that, as well as how to handle customers coming in and asking specific targeted questions about using cannabis for medical ailments. A great example I like to use is if a pregnant person comes into the store and asks, what can I use for my morning sickness? What is the best cannabis product for me? That is certainly a challenge for the bud tender to ensure that they're acting compliant. The next thing they say is going to be potentially very scrutinized by the CCC. So knowing what to say in those situations comes from adequate training of your bud tenders. Okay. And again, demonstrating through the media of consumption or people under the influence, that's a big no-no. That's something we really want to avoid. And tying or relating cannabis to the combined use of alcohol, nicotine, or other drugs, strictly prohibited, as well as providing some kind of like risky or daring sort of lifestyle relationship can be very, very dangerous. But what we can do is we can talk about your story, the story of the operators, and that's something that we typically like to focus on when we're marketing for our clients who are cannabis retail operators here at CannDelta. Okay, and then again, included in all ads for adults would be ensuring that we give our license number, that we are providing age gating, okay, and any other information that might be required by the commission. It can be very helpful to provide educational materials as a form of advertisement and marketing, and creating awareness about cannabis and its and sort of how it works with the body. Providing informationally based content is a great way to market your brand and also positions you as an expert in your space. That can be done through brand and storytelling and community engagement posts. And again, these posts must be targeted towards people who are 21 years of age or older, and certainly not designed in a way to allure young people. What's not allowed? Promoting THC or cannabis product sales, medical or therapeutic claims or imagery or language, or even lettering and coloring that's appealing to minors. And that's especially true when we're looking at the design of labels for cannabis products. We don't want cannabis products to look or resemble like anything that's available in the non-infused space. We've seen examples of chocolate bars or candy bags that have a cannabis infused product that are from the illicit market that are shown to mimic those. Those are strictly forbidden in this regulatory framework, and certainly something that production facilities will want to avoid. Great. So if you have more questions and have not yet downloaded our free ebook, you can do this on our website at CannDelta.com. Head over to our Rhode Island page and grab that ebook. It's certainly a great help. And we've got a ton more resources on our YouTube channel, not just about Rhode Island, but applying for licenses in any state. Visit us at CannDelta.com or check out our YouTube channel for more great videos on everything you need to know about getting licensed